Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Welcome to the Daily Medicine Transmission for December 8th, 2021. Welcome back, everyone. And if you're new to this channel, welcome and thank you for stopping by. So the quickening, I hope everyone is doing okay here. We're going to talk about this quickening. It does actually feel like that time, again, is being condensed or contracted in a way, which does lead to the experience that time is moving faster. This may not be the case for everybody, but I know I'm feeling it. And what I have noticed over the last couple days, especially since the closing of the eclipse door, is that there has been a very distinct overlap of experience, almost a synchronization of many people's experiences along one trajectory or one baseline of experience. And of course, how we interact with this, how it comes through our own unique personal filter is different. And that's what makes life what it is, the diversity of all of our experiences coming together. But especially with the moon in Aquarius still right now, we're each kind of adapting to the immediate environment and feeling into an experience of all being connected. And so there tends to be in these moments an overlap and a synchronization of experiences in a generalized way. And I've been really feeling that in general. I've been talking to people in my own personal life and clients, and then of course just observing what's going on outside of me and seeing where things are lining up, and definitely seeing where things are not lining up, and it's becoming a lot more obvious. And so the quickening here is this condensing of time that makes it feel like it's moving faster, but also too that now that the eclipse door has closed, the expression of what that represents, that whole portal of the eclipses, the full moon eclipse and the solar eclipse, is now starting to make its way out. And are we ready, right? Are we ready for it? And can we kind of hold our own in the midst of it? These are really good questions to ask. So we've actually got, we kind of got a, some support. Oh my gosh. It has been, you can tell that things are starting to really move quicker, and we're kind of being pulled along this stream, so to speak, because it's just almost hard to keep up with ourselves. It's certainly how I feel right now. It's just difficult to keep up with the stream of energy and the motion of time, and the speed of it seems to be moving along a lot faster. So even my words coming out of my mouth seem to struggle with it. So thank you for your patience and your understanding. And just we're all here together, being an infallible human, of course, or a fallible human. I guess that's probably a more accurate thing to say. So the Schumann resonance has been pretty active in the last day or so, and we're going to look at that chart and kind of give ourselves a visual of what that has looked like. And it does feel like that it was a window or a screen in some ways was opened, or it was cleansed. We got a squeegeing in some ways of the third eye, and we got a very clear look at some things that are going to be larger themes as this eclipse cycle unfolds over the next couple of months, and getting a really clear look when that Schumann resonance, especially in the last day or so, really amplified. It got very loud, not as loud as it's been. And there's not a ton of solar activity facing our planet. Of course, there's a lot happening on the sun right now, and it does impact us, even though all of the coronal holes and the CMEs are not towards the planet, but there's still an impact there, and there's still us feeling it. But I do also feel like whatever's going on with the Schumann resonance is assisting us and kind of like blasted open this window. And it certainly has kind of closed back down again. And when we look at the Schumann resonance itself, you'll see how it has since calmed down from the really amplified activity over the last day or so. So if you found yourself in dream time, in your meditation state, or just getting random downloads when you're moving through your daily life and routines, I get the real strong sense here, and based on just watching and observing the Schumann, that an opening was made available to us for us to look in the mirror at ourselves and to be very aware of what we are dealing with right now and what is unfolding as we walk along our pathway. So how is everyone feeling? How are you doing? What's going on for you? Are you feeling the intensity? I'm sure you are. And I have no doubt that that's the case. And if you're feeling like things are moving faster than you can keep up with, well, that's because they are. And this is another really important reason why keeping our stillness in the midst of this activity is so important. So, again, the moon in Aquarius can allow us to stay detached from the emotional impact of things, but it also is amplifying, I think, our attachment, not even attachment, that's not the right word. It's amplifying our connection to each other, and it's reinforcing it at an intuitive level so that we are kind of getting brought along with the quickening of the entire planetary grid and the entire collective as a whole. And so if you feel yourself being pulled along, that's because you are. And this is why it's so important that we are able to utilize these practices, whatever they are, for us to find our stillness and to not feed into the distraction and the dramatic events that are unfolding, because a lot of that is timed very precisely in order to keep us kind of in a very specific, with a very specific focus, and keeping us in a very specific, penned in a very specific box, right? And even when we think that we're maybe getting our own downloads, it's really important that we're being honest with ourselves and really, really doing the difficult work of discernment, right? Because even at that level of our own thought processes, it's so curated, and we've talked about this many times already, it's so curated that sometimes it's really hard, unless we are very committed to this process, to know what is our own thoughts and what isn't. And I think that many of us get caught here. And we're getting caught in a web, and we're getting caught in the matrix. And, when you watch the movie, for instance, right, it becomes very how sophisticated it really is, right? How precise it really is. Machines that operate in this precision are creating this web of reality that you don't even know that is false. And of course, that is falling away as a result of this natural process that is the result of natural ascension. It's the result of the solar system moving through a new part of the galaxy and being exposed to higher frequencies of light and information. The information is coming in. The quarantine that we have been in is disintegrating, and as a result of this, which also does lead to a faster awakening process or a quickening. And so everything's going to start speeding up, it feels like. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to speed up in the way that we want it to. But it also means that being able to just be present, and at the same time be able to be present and feel the experience and acknowledge it, and also be able to hold ourselves in our stillness as we are going through this really this like thrill ride almost, but we are going through this quickening process as humanity right now. And so it's, take a deep breath, do what you need to do to get grounded, spend more time in a natural setting, spend more time away from the devices if you possibly can, rather than the consistent recycling of information on social media, because that's really not actually doing anything but reinforcing the web of the false matrix that has been presented and created for us, because it's just getting much more difficult. I've seen some information recently about the 12/12 Ascension Portal, and if you see the astrology for that day, it is gnarly. It is gnarly. That's the day that the sun is going to square Neptune as well. And Mars will be at the very last degree of Scorpio. And so there's such a strong potential right now for us to be, almost catapulted into a situation or into a mindset or a perspective or just into a reality that we don't even acknowledge that may not be real, or certainly will be not where we want to end up. And this is not meant at all to, bring about fear or to bring people into a state of like confusion. But with Neptune in Pisces right now going direct, that is a big part of this, is the confusion. And in some ways, this is an initiation process into our level of mastery of the quantum realm. So it's moving faster. We're being propelled through it faster. We're like getting put through this wormhole a lot faster as a result of time contracting. And this is where, the wheat gets separated from the chaff, right? And we've heard this phrase many, many times, but it's going to become more difficult and more challenging and much quicker. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. But with the Schumann yesterday, whatever that stimulated that, it opened a window into a very important element that each of us need to be honest with and to look at, and is important for this process. So we're gonna look at that together, and then we'll get into the reading and of course the astrology, just like we do every day. So I hope everyone's doing well. I'm gonna check in here with the chat. Felt so much emotional pain last night, like it was some kind of overlap with the collective, taking a lot of consciousness to stay present with this consolidation of energy. I totally agree with that. And it's like we're inseparable now almost, and that's always been the case, but we've talked about this before, and this has been reinforced by other people that do this similar type of work, that we've spent a long time in a position where a certain few people have really held up the bulk of things, and it was a very unbalanced type of experience. But now, as a result of where we are going and the evolution of consciousness of humanity, everybody's vote counts now. And so we have really no choice but to be completely enmeshed in the collective experience. And with the moon in Aquarius, this is really amplified and very obvious. So it is taking a lot of consciousness to stay present, and it will continue to do so. And again, this is part of the strategy of becoming into wisdom, right? Pallas Athena in Pisces right now. It's if you want to be initiated into the mystery school or into the next density of humanity, especially fifth density, you have to go through a process that shows that you're actually qualified to handle it. And this is like the next level. So it's difficult, and it's going to provide a lot of challenges, but I don't think it's anything that we can't actually handle. But it will require, being honest with ourselves. And whatever that window opened with the Schumann resonance over the last 2 days especially, I think is really important to take seriously and to look at. So many messages in my dreams. I can't write them all down. Yeah, there's so many things here that I can't write them all down. I can't even process all of them. I'm just letting them happen. And what seems to stick out in my consciousness is really what I'm attempting to focus on, or at least work with right now. I felt almost more psychic and connected last night. Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely becoming much more, the sensitivity to things is becoming much more apparent. Ready to go move out into the woods. Dude, I almost quit doing this, to be perfectly honest. I had a moment about 2 days ago where I was just like, all I'm doing is feeding the beast right now by staying online and staying connected to all of this process. And I really was just like, you know what? I was this close to just being like, I'm done, right? I'm just done. I'm going off into the woods and not participating in any of this anymore. And I know that that's not what I'm here to do. And so if you feel like that too, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do it. Some people, that may absolutely be their pathway, but I also do feel like that part of the Starseed mission, especially, is to acknowledge that discomfort and the disconnect or the inconjunct of that experience over, and realizing why we feel that way, because there's so much about this reality that is unnatural and created to keep us penned in. And so your desire to go into a more natural setting is, I think, really normal, and it's actually healthy. And it also represents like how the false matrix, the digital world that we have been trapped in for so long, is really not holding its shape for you anymore. And it's just like, I'm done. I'm ready to go. So I'm totally feeling that too, and I can really appreciate that so much. So I want to take a minute here to look at the Schumann, and I want to show you, I mean, it hasn't, this is not new. All it's really doing here is we're going to be reinforcing a lot of what we've been observing on our own already. So here's what we're looking at just in the last day or so. So this is the 6th and the 7th and into the 8th. Now this particular graph and the website that I'm using, it doesn't update as quickly as, say, the actual measurement tools on the website here at the University of Tomsk in Russia. So you can see that it has really started to minimize as of today. There's less white, there's less red, there's less green. It's starting to become a much more uniform color as of now in the last hours. And so it's starting to come kind of back down to a baseline. But you can see here that it's been fairly loud for the most part over the last 2 days, especially here. This was like yesterday into this morning, depending on where you are, it got very loud. So if we go back and look at, where are we here? If we go back and look at this graph that has a lot more of the frequency, the amplification, the amplitude, the quality, and the frequency, you can see here that there was a pretty significant, this was a very gradual rise, and then came back down, and then a little bit more of a drastic rise, and then there was this green line had, you could see right here that came up, and then there was a more uniform spike in the amplitude that went up to about 35 when it's normally down here between 7 and 8. And so it got very loud in its amplitude this morning. And if we scroll down, we're going to see the same things that we usually see, right? Actually, the quality hasn't really changed much in the face of that very loud amplification that just happened. But one thing that did happen is this red line has been pretty flat for a number of days. And then you see a very significant drop. And then, of course, just like it does every single time that the amplification goes up, the actual frequency, the pitch of the field itself drops, right? The pitch drops, and it has to, right? It has to, in order to compensate for how loud it's getting if we want to maintain the quality. And sometimes it feels like when we get these large amplifications, right, when the Schumann gets louder, when the wave gets bigger in and of itself, and we've talked about this before, that the frequency or the pitch drops because it needs to move at a slower a slower oscillation in order to gain the momentum or the power, I think, to really push the amplification. Also, too, what it seems like is you can see a pretty big jump back up in the frequency after this particular drop in the amplification and the quality, right? If you go back up here and you see that there's this gradual climb and then it starts to come back down. And when it comes down to a baseline here, this is also when we see the quality start to even out as well. But what does happen is that the frequency goes back up and has been consistently a lot higher than it normally is. The Schumann is meant to be between, down here, 7.4, 7.5, and is hovering around 8 hertz, which is a pretty big difference for the frequency itself. And so again, it comes back up and then it comes back down and then the massive drop. And so when the frequency or the pitch drops back down very suddenly like that, it is almost like it opens something, right? There's an opening, or there is a reconnection between us and the Schumann in that moment. And then the frequency of the Schumann resonance goes back up, but our frequency for the most part is kind of still staying in this general area. And then it becomes a lot harder and there's more of a disconnect, right, between us and the grid of the planet. So every time there's this loud amplification, it's trying to get our attention. And in that process, it feels like what happens is the pitch drops down to something that we each as human beings in this biological, electrical meat suit is able to connect with, right? Because we as a species and we as humanity have not reached the same frequency that the planet is operating at. And that's something that has been talked about before. Like, the planet has already made the transition in terms of its density, right? It's already moved from 4th density into, it's not quite there yet, I feel like, into the 5th density, but it's getting there. Like, the Earth is like one step ahead of us in this process. So in order for us to come along, she kind of has to like drop down into a frequency that aligns with us. And when that happens, then we get really strong intuition. We can have access to our own bliss in that moment. We may feel really activated. Maybe we get all of the downloads, right? Our astral realm is really powerful. We're getting access to information. Our body may feel good. Some people that are not operating at a higher level of frequency in general because they're still holding on to a lot of density. When this happens, I feel like that there is the opposite type of physical symptoms, right? You get the headaches and the ear ringing and all this other stuff as a result of this. But for people who are consistently now kind of hovering closer, I think, to where the Earth is normally, when this happens, it does seem like that it really kind of, I don't know, it just feels like we feel more like ourselves, right? And we feel kind of like in the flow. So, but still, we're not quite where the Earth is. And I think that's what we're seeing here whenever the frequency drops. That's just my opinion. I don't, I'm just observing and putting pieces together. I don't have, I'm not getting like, I have to do more research about like what all of these aspects truly mean from a scientific standpoint and a technological standpoint. So, and that's something that I would love to put together when I have some time, is like an actual tutorial about the Schumann from, in a way that people can understand, that is not full of new age woo-woo-ness. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. And I know that these things are all connected, but I think some of that is really not accessible to the average person. So I want to make it accessible to the average person so that more people can realize how much they are actually energetic, spiritual beings living this material experience, and for a very specific reason. So that's the Schumann for today, and I wanted to share that because it was pretty significant. So let's see here. I'm going to start we're gonna go into the reading now, and I'm gonna bring up the reading, and I'm gonna minimize this window here, and we're going to take a moment to get grounded into this process. So I'm gonna bring the bowl. Remember, the bowl is tuned at C major, which is corresponds to the root chakra. So just take a moment here to get into your body, kind of drop down into your own root, imagining that your connection to the ground, either through your feet or the bottom of your body, your sits bones, is bringing your energy down into the connection with the physical nature here, and dropping down even further as like a root system or a network of capillaries perhaps that is dropping down into the crust of the planet. Now we're going to take a deep breath in, deep diaphragmatic breath in. And release. I found it very difficult today to get myself consistently in this place. So if you're feeling that as well, I'm right with you. It took a long time, and it was a very busy morning when seemingly it shouldn't have been. And it took a lot of time this morning in my meditation to find a consistent connection, because I kept getting pulled back up and pulled back into the mind. That is definitely definitely a strategy to keep us from being and connected to what really matters. It's a very, and this is what social media and digital signals, they really do bring us back into the mind exclusively, and we find ourselves there. And so this is why meditation is so important. It's not meant to necessarily make us feel good or to relax us, although that is an incredible side effect, and we do need that. But at the same time, what it really is meant to do is allow us to settle down into ourselves so that we are not connected to all of the signals that are either coming in or going out or just swirling around in our head. And there's no way to get away from that entirely while we're here in this experience, but the trap is believing that is reality. And you can see how that has played itself out now, and why we're in the position we are collectively is because we're jacked into the matrix, right at the back of our heads, right in our the reptilian brain, basically. And there is a very important function of the limbic system, no doubt. We wouldn't have it if it wasn't an important function for our survival. But when we are plugged, when we're getting digital signals plugged directly into our limbic system, that is affecting the hypothalamus, that is affecting the amygdala, which is all affecting our perception, this is where we easily get pulled out of our true nature. So again, natural vibrations like the bowls or your own toning, and being out in a natural setting, listening to natural sounds, water flowing, wind blowing, fire crackling, birds singing, and other animals making noises, and just those types of sounds are so much more real than maybe things like guided meditations. I know I talked to somebody about this morning, about guided meditations on YouTube or even any kind of app or binaural beats. You have to be very, very discerning about what seems to be given away for free on YouTube, and in terms of what may be a signal that's coming into that area and you don't even realize it. So just some things to consider. But natural sounds, natural toning is going to be your best friend in this situation. So We're going to start with this reading right now. So we're going to, the swiftness is pretty, here's our quickening right here. Mercury in Sagittarius, the Eight of Wands. So the Eight of Wands is, like I said, there is a swiftness, and a swiftness is demanded. That's the other thing. We don't necessarily want to slow it all down. We want to be in the flow of this swiftness. There's no getting around this, right? Even though the swiftness is operating outside of us and maybe through us, and we can be in the flow of it, it is the inner, timeless, infinite part of ourselves that we really want to bring our awareness to when we're starting to feel overwhelmed, perhaps, or feeling like that we're getting swept away. But the swiftness is demanded here with the Eight of Wands. And we do have Mercury in Sagittarius right now. So decisive action in very high speed motion. It's important to be able to operate in this field in order to keep up with the frequency. So again, the frequency of the Schumann resonance, for instance, goes back up. And we then have to kind of operate in that higher pitch, right? The higher oscillation. So this also can represent a very sudden realization and realizing that a solution for a problem we may have been considering is already there. It's just a matter of tapping into it. Also, too, it's something to consider as well is that the spirit needs freedom to fly. And Sagittarius ultimately is about the freedom of ideas and beliefs and the big picture, right? The broad horizon. And we need freedom to be able to explore those realms. And the spirit that is often represented by the air element and the realm of the mind, and Mercury representing that, it needs freedom to fly. And so that's something to consider as well, that when we get locked into the signals that are being kind of pumped in, we're not really free. We're just kind of a subject of what has been, that's what's being inputted into our nervous system, which is the way that we conceptualize the world around us. So the spirit needs freedom in order to fly, in order to broaden our horizons and to actually see the big picture. So this card has a lot of motion, it has a lot of change, it has a lot of development, and a lot of progression of ideas attached to it. So you may have found coming into the moment here, this causal factor of us, like the ideas are moving swiftly, the time is moving swiftly, and it's moving in all directions, but it is a very balanced movement if you look at this card, right? It's in all different directions, but it is within a diamond, which is really just a square turned on its end. And also the square here on the background of it. So, and the central point, there's this electrical swift energy that's moving in all directions, but it's not necessarily chaotic. It's very balanced. And you have the rainbow here, which is the visible light spectrum going through the prism. So we see each color representing a different frequency of light. And also too, this is a contract. It's a bridge as well. It's the covenant between ourselves materially and our higher self and our connection to that. So I feel like that the quickening is already in place and it's kind of propelling us along in some ways. And we really want to be engaged as consciously as we can and as masterfully as we can along these lines. And we can be going in any direction. It doesn't seem to necessarily matter. It's not very focused on one direction. It's the idea that the movement of activity and the movement of action and transformation is happening along the mind, obviously, and it's moving out in all directions, and it's very, very potent. So I do feel like that this is the quickening already in progress. And so when we move into the heart of the moment, here is our Prince of Cups. Oh my. We're going to plumb the depths, right? This is taking the quickening of the mind, right? Because the prince represents the air element, and taking that quickness and that swiftness of the mind, and we're going to take it and we're going to go right into the depths of the feeling. We're going to apply what we know, and we're going to engage in a process that allows us to feel it rather than just know it. And this is going to really separate. It really is going to separate the wheat from the chaff in this situation, because part of going into the depths is that moment where you have to look at yourself in as the reflection in the water before you dive right in, or that moment in the never-ending story, right? When Atreyu gets through the multiple gates and he gets to the mirror, and who does he see? But he sees Sebastian in the mirror, and he has to walk through it and merge with that part of himself, and vice versa. But in order to do that, we actually have to face the reflection back on ourselves and not fear, immersing ourselves in the feeling experience. And so we had the Prince of Cups come up 2 days ago in terms of our impact or effect or likely outcome. And so here we are now. So we had the Schumann resonance do what it does best for whatever reason, right? Either it was a connection between us and the planet herself being our guide and our nurturer, and really wanting to take as many of us with her as she can, right? Making some sort of opening for us to see what we need to see, so that we can then go into the depths and feel what that is, so that we can resolve it, whatever it is. It's going to be different for everyone in this situation. So here we are about to make the plunge, and with some courage and some fearlessness here. Now, what's interesting to me is in terms of where we're at energetically rooted, right, in that subconscious, the Muse, right? This is inspiration and artistic inspiration, resourcefulness, creativity, in order to bring some sort of creative process into fruition, right? We not leave ourselves open, but we are intentionally opening and connecting to the larger field of experience in order to be inspired, right? Creatively and artistically and in our imagination. But it's reversed, right? And it feels to me that in this, there is this swiftness of mind that has preceded this moment here. And now we are here ready to take that swiftness and that cleverness and that open-mindedness down into the depths. And there is, we can be afraid. I would recommend that we, muster our courage to plumb the depths, so that we can genuinely feel what is at first only known through the mind, right? And coming in hot, right? So there is a willingness to open ourselves up to being susceptible to influence when we go into this space. But it's about the mental mastery and the cleverness. And, I will say too, when we get to the astrology of where Mercury is at, it all kind of tie back around in terms of where are we going to gather this mental mastery or this cleverness or the progression of ideas. Where are we going to gather it from in order to then take it into this really feeling-based experience, or going into the depth of feeling, right? The very scorpionic elements. And with Mars and Scorpio, I mean, that's a big part of our courage too, right? Being able to go into these spaces and not really thinking about it, just doing it. But we can go into this space and we may be susceptible to influence, but there is something here that allows us to be influenced without actually being pulled under, right? And so it allows for us to take in that experience without being taken over, if that makes sense. But where we're at when it comes to the energetic root, here's the quickening part. The labor pains are not over. So it's moving faster, but we're still right in the midst of the labor with the Muse reversed. And we may feel caught in some sort of blockage, right? Or that we feel like that our resourcefulness for bringing forward something is blocked in some way, or there may be outside obstacles that are holding that at bay for whatever reason. So it's important that we don't resist this energy and just allow it to be what it is. Maybe it's not time for the birth yet, right? Maybe the quickening is happening, but that is because that doesn't mean that the birth is happening. That means that the labor is, happening right now. And so maybe it's just not time yet, or we are feeling the pains and not making the connection that is part of the larger process of creation. And this is operating at a subconscious level. This is where we're drawing our power from personally. And if we are not aware of the blockage or the obstacles or just the timing of it, if we're not aware of it or gracefully accepting it and leaning into it, I think this is where people start to get into trouble. And we'll see here that this is where this is really going to influence a lot of where we end up if we are, well, either way, it's going to influence where we end up. But as you see here, the Two of Wands is reversed. So there's a real tendency here to be very reckless and restless about things because it's not coming to fruition exactly the way we want, our egos and our minds want. And part of that is because we are now going into the depths of the feeling of it instead of trying to get to the outcome. And that's really, really difficult for people. And they just want the outcome for the most part and not actually feeling into the experience, which is where we're getting all of our resources from. So there is, we do want to, what I see is, our attention seems to be really released right now in the fact that something has been cleared out of the way, and we want to clear it out of the way, and we recognize that it has been cleared out of the way. That's the thing with about the Four of Keys reversed. Like, we've taken the time to clear the obstacle out of the way, and I think this is incredibly frustrating to see and to be aware of, and at the same time being very rooted energetically into what is still blocking us creatively and emotionally and in our imagination as well. And I think this is really, on one level, we certainly want to clear the obstacles out of the way, and we want to put our energy into clearing the obstacles out of the way, and we want to get moving because the obstacle is cleared out of the way. Or realizing that an obstruction may be very easily and quickly dispatched. And some external events may help ease that situation as well. So I think that there's some serious frustration because we see the way, we know it's been cleared away, we know that there is probably a really easy way to clear the obstruction if it's still there, and I feel like it is still there. And there may be external events that'll help clear things away a lot easier, but there is they're at the root here energetically, which is why we want to go into the feeling experience. We want to go into the depths. We want to be this Prince of Cups to a certain extent because there's something in the experience itself that is going to be very important and not so much about clearing the obstacles out of the way, even though that's really what we're paying attention to is how easily it could happen or that it's already been done, right? But where this all leads to is a sense of recklessness and destruction and revenge, right? Revenge is a big part of this card when it's reversed, right? Because Dominion, Mars and Aries, right? The Two of Wands, it's like the seed point of our creation process or our transformation of fire. Is actually has a focus now, right? It's differentiated, but that means that we have somewhere to go with it. We have something to act upon. But when it's reversed, we want to act on some things and we may be very hasty about doing it, or we may find ourselves wanting revenge or destruction because we know that this obstruction here is going to be easily, pushed away. And that's what the focus is on, is pushing away the obstacle, moving past it, utilizing our resources. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't, that we should just sit down and be like, it's never going to move, or I don't know what to do, or I don't have any energy. But there is something very, very important that we need to go down into, right? And feel through that experience. Otherwise, the focus here on clearing away this obstacle in and of itself is going to lead to, we're just going to burn ourselves out, or we're going to act out in a hasty way that is going to be more destructive than creative, if that makes sense. And this is a very generalized reading. And in some ways, this is exactly what, this is exactly what's being created for us, right? It is leading so many people right into this experience, right? Because we want a quick answer. We know we know that it's just a matter of just like clearing it away. That it's not something that we have to work that hard at, but there is something here that is blocking us, or we know is blocking us, and it's really because it's just not done growing yet. Like, we're not done through the process. So you can't force a birth, right? I mean, you can, but not without some very intense destruction and damage. And I do feel like that is such a high potential right now. So when it comes to the guidance to really handle this, or to give us a sense of, how we can not destroy something, or destroy ourselves, or to act out of restlessness or revenge. Believe me, like, I feel it, right? That was part of like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore because it's just feeding the beast. And why not just like clear it away by not participating anymore? Well, that's a really good question. And all of us are going to have to ask ourselves that question, I think. But what is very clear here, number one, oh my gosh, how many times does the panda need to make itself known to us that we have got to create a sacred space within ourselves in order to receive something, in order to actually create something and birth something that is healthy and has longevity, wherever it is, either your physical space, if you need to create a sacred space at your work, because that's where you're still in a position where you're working at a place where you find it really difficult to access as part of yourself. It's imperative that we do it. And I would say that energetically and spiritually, again, I mean, this card has come up so many times now in the past week in this position that it is very clear that we need to keep focused on creating a sacred space within our own creative seat, rather than trying to force something to happen outside of us so that we can feel like that something is happening. And we will be given all our little breadcrumbs to show us that things are happening, right? And give us a sense that that things are happening without actually doing this work. This work is the biggest threat to the controlled demolition that is really just going to take us into another controlled system. This work right here, sacred space, sacred, right? You have to cultivate some sacredness into your own seat of creation if you actually want to bring forward you bring forward this new creation, whatever it is. And we also, I would say, with the One of Keys, right, the architect, we're still at the beginning, right, of what we are creating. And the keys are the physical element. It is the physical element. It is the nuts and bolts of the material world. And it's this suggests here, and what it represents is that we have to step into a position of authority over our own lives. And I believe it was yesterday with the Queen of Keys reversed, right, feeling at the root that, this disconnect from our own confidence and authority of our own world. So this is reminding us that we actually have to acknowledge our authority in the situation and recognize our own talents and our strengths and step into that position of power in order to dictate how the growth of this process is going to go along. So if you think about it from maybe a DNA, for instance, right, a DNA standpoint, as an architect, right, the blueprint is embedded in each and every cell in our body, which is our DNA. But we actually have to bring forward our own spiritual nature, our own spiritual infinite higher self, right? Our connection to source, however you conceptualize it for yourself. And it needs to be a sacred process, not something that we're building for to give us a sense of power as a result of what we're building. We have to bring our power into the situation, and then that is what actually dictates the actual growth or the actual development, right? Just like our DNA is a blueprint and epigenetics is the actual expression of them based on our role as an architect. And, you know, you see he is smiling, right? And he is the one pointing and saying, hey, the masculine, right? She definitely is not smiling. And she is also looking in the same direction. And they have completely different perspectives on what is happening. She seems to be way more contemplative, maybe just observing, right? There's that feminine again, being the observer, being the witness, being just holding space and really just looking at what is without making any direction or making any kind of declaration. So we need these two parts of ourselves, right? That's why they're both here. But the masculine aspect is the one that's putting it into action, while the feminine aspect of us is bearing witness and looking for things that need to maybe be adjusted that you don't see when you're in the middle of acting. But again, and that's where the sacred space comes in, right? And don't you think it's interesting that in the Akashic deck, which is what this is too, the Muse is number 15. In the traditional tarot, the Devil is number 15. I mean, these are different number systems, right? The Akashic tarot functions on a octave system, right? A system of 8, whereas the tarot functions on a system of 10. So they're different number systems, so they're not totally translatable, but the connection is definitely not lost on me in terms of where our, you know, we bring the inspiration from a non-physical place in order to create something in the physical world. So that's where the creative resourcefulness would be coming from, but we're not there yet. I mean, look, this is not fully built yet. It's in the process of happening. And so we have to step into our position of authority. And at the same time, we have to be the witness and the observer and be able to see when there are things that need adjustment. And that comes with creating our creative seat being a sacred space. Because that will keep us on track, right? As opposed to our, being pulled into the Draco or the reptilian nature that is just trying to gather power from others from what we create. But we have to, at the very least, acknowledge ourselves as the architect of our own reality. And if we don't do that, then we do leave ourselves open to having somebody else or some other force do it for us. And then we can just be blind, deaf, and dumb about it all, right? And some people, that's what they want. Some people, it's too hard it's too difficult and to be free. Right? Because you have to actually work at it constantly when you are in the face of a system that wants to siphon everything off of you. So that's something to consider. And when it comes to where our focus is and how we see the obstruction already cleared away in our own mind's eye, we are aware that it would be very easy to wipe away that obstruction, and maybe kind of frustrated that we were just no, I want that. Let's do that. Or it's already out of the way. The polar bear is interesting because it says stand up for yourself and speak compassionately, and be present, right? No attachment to outcome. I think that's the really important message of this card. So show up and be present, right? Show up and be present. Ask for what you want. I mean, there's no reason that we shouldn't do that. Approach the situation with focused intensity, but also a sense of innocence and no attachment to the outcome. I think that's where we really generally get stuck, is the attachment to outcome, especially right now. And when we have that attachment to outcome, it will lead us to acting recklessly and destructively, thinking that we're actually putting something into, acting on our own creation process, right? The wands or the fire. But if we're attached to the outcome, especially when we know that the way has been cleared and we're ready to charge forward, and we feel it, we're almost being pulled along that way. But we have to, I would say, the no attachment to the outcome, but being totally present is going to really, really assist us right now. And with Hilarion, speaking of being honest with ourselves, like that, when Hilarion is reversed, I mean, losing focus, right? Being totally illogical about an issue, confusion because we're deceiving ourselves. Or there's important information that is not known right now. That's something that is really sticking out to me, that not everything is being presented to us right now for whatever reason. And again, this goes back to the Muse being reversed too, that there is an inversion here because it's not time yet. And there's still more of the labor process to go through. And so it's not, the way is clear, but we haven't gone through the canal yet. And so I think there is, again, this like really strong push, like we want to be done with it. And I think that the polar bear, rather than, there's focus intensity and this warrior heart and asking for what we want, but there's an importance to showing up and being present with what is, right? And we have to bring our mind back into focus, right? Open up the lines of communication with our spiritual self and our higher self, and be more honest with ourselves, like truly be more honest with ourselves. And we all could stand to do that. I'm not suggesting here that we all have something to feel guilty about or that we are doing something wrong. But this is really showing that if you are really focused on, your own type of like where you're going and where you're getting to, because the obstruction's out of the way, there's something very confusing happening right now. And I think a lot of it is self-deception. A lot of it is that, the programming of the matrix is getting changed, and maybe it's so subtle that people aren't realizing it, and that's when they're charging forward. And there's just a lot of people not being very honest with themselves right now because they are not willing to look at their reflection before they plunge into the depths. And this is where, again, the wheat is separated from the chaff, right? Is in these types of situations. So bring our mind back into focus, be logical, and honest with ourselves, like really strong personal inventory in this moment. So really, really powerful. And I know that it's like things are moving very quickly. And in some ways we want to just go with the flow of it. And I think that's a really, instead of forcing anything, because that is just going to lead, like I said, to destruction. And we don't want to do that. We've come so far. Like why risk it now because we're impatient or we're restless or we just can't stand the unfairness anymore and we want revenge in some way. So it's important. It's very important that we're taking personal inventory seriously and not getting caught up in the fact that we think we're doing something, and really we're just kind of reinforcing the new Matrix program. It's just the way that I'm seeing it right now. And again, this is part of the eclipse. The door closed, and now we're taking with us what was part of that, and for better or for worse, right? For better or for worse. So let's take a look here also at the important information not known, the Muse and Hilarion, feeling it as some kind of wrinkle in time we can't resolve in the world, only internally. Volunteers of America. VOA FYI. Yeah, I'm trying to. Oh, are you talking about? Yeah, I'm curious what VOA is in reference to this. Volunteers of America. Now I'm just thinking of that song. I totally agree, Barb. It's something that we can't resolve in the world, only internally. I completely and utterly agree with that. And with other, right? Like there's a lot of support here with each other, and we can support each other. But there is, the Agent Smiths are working overtime, and that's become very clear to me. And not at first, I thought it might have been an act of desperation, but after having a conversation this morning and really, really looking at it and sitting with it, what I know to actually be true, for me at least, is that it's really just they have a deadline to meet. And they know exactly what to do, right? The precision of a machine is just remember, right? It's precision, and it's a program that they, every time we feed in it through social media, through any kind of digital interface at all, we are giving information constantly, and it is adjusting the programming all the time. And so there is, like Barb said, a wrinkle in time we can't resolve, and everybody's trying to act in accordance with that in their own way. And the only way to really resolve it is not by out there, but is internally. And yeah, that's a great way to look at it. So I appreciate that perspective so much. Okay, so where are we here? I want to get into the astrology for today, and and take a look at that. All right, so here we go. I'm going to close some windows here, and all right, so the first thing I want to bring up is number one, where we're looking at with Mercury in Sagittarius. It is in conjunction with fixed star Ras Al Hague. And I've talked about Ras Al Hague a number of times. Number one, this was actually the degree of the solar eclipse last December, was in conjunction with Ras Al Hague. Ras Al Hague is a star in the head of the serpent bearer, or the snake bearer, or Asclepius, right? In the constellation of Asclepius. So this is in the head of the serpent bearer. And this particular degree that Mercury is currently at right now is, now remember, Mercury just had the square with Neptune yesterday, right? And we talked about this, we can align ourselves with where we know we're going all day long, right? We can be really positive and optimistic and look at the big picture and put on all of the accessories of where we're going, right? We can really act it out, and for all intents and purposes become that as a result of our acting it out. But it's really no match for Neptune and Pisces, especially these mutable squares. And Mercury is at its weakest in Sagittarius, okay? So even in our minds that we're just like, we're getting there, it was just like, nope, the wave came, just like the big wave of the Schumann resonance. Wow, man, I just got a huge hit on that. The big wave of the Schumann resonance just came through and just wiped it all out. And it was like, oh, no. Oh, no. I mean, yes, but no. And that's because there are things that we all need to still work on internally, right? There's still lots to work on internally. And I'm not suggesting in any way that we should not stay at least one eye here on where we're going and be optimistic and find meaning in our collective connection with each other. I mean, this is my wheelhouse, like this is where my Mercury is. Okay. My Mercury, my natal Mercury is right here. My sun is in Sag, Mars in Sag, Neptune in Sag, right? All here. So I get it. And that's why I'm saying with some amount of authority here, because I know what this dynamic really is. And when it is up against Neptune in Pisces prograde here, the square, Neptune just dissolves it all, right? And it's just like, yeah, you can interface with the meaning of all of this all day long, and you can put on the hat and the mask and whatever. But the reality is that the wave's going to come through and dissolve everything back down to the very base constituent vibration of all of it. And do you have the capacity to really hold yourself in the midst of that? That's what that square, and there's going to be 2 more of them. And then the moon when it comes back around. So that was just the first. When the sun comes into Sagittarius on the 12th of December, the 12/12 portal, it's going here. I'll even show you right now. There it is. Right there. And then Mercury will be just past the galactic center. Mars will be at the very last degree of Scorpio. Look at that. Venus in conjunction with Pluto all this day. And the moon will have just passed, will be in conjunction with Chiron. This is no joke. That is no joke, right? If we can get through the 12th, I think we might be okay. And this is where we're really kind of leading up to right now. So anyway, we'll come back to here. That square. So where Mercury is now in conjunction with this star, this fixed star of not Zubin Escamali, I got that on the brain, clearly, with Ras Al Haig is the snake bearer, right? The snake charmer, the ability to hold the serpent energy without it actually, wrapping itself around us and constricting us or biting us and poisoning us. It is a mastery of our Kundalini for healing purposes specifically. When we use that energy to exploit or to take power from people or to manage our own feeling of disempowerment, this is where you get the Draco, right? In terms of how they have inserted themselves everywhere into power positions. So one thing that we can use today with Mercury in this conjunction is finding the mental, through our mental sphere, as weak as it is in Sagittarius, at least in this moment, we have the opportunity to see how we can harness this energy for our own healing, right? So this is where the internal work comes back again, right? And really addressing it in our own healing process as opposed to trying to direct it out there in some sort of external way, because the external world is going to mirror us no matter what. And so if we want it to mirror back to us the fact that we're all free and released from, this prison essentially of reality, then we have to cultivate that freedom within ourselves. And I think that this moment here in conjunction with the head of the snake bearer or Asclepius is we can put our mental energy towards this type of mastery. So the moon is still in Aquarius, as we've seen, so we'll go through the moon transits for today as well. There's a certain amount of seclusion and self-containment that we can utilize, right? And many of us probably feel this already normally, where we feel like an alien, but really it's everybody else around us that's the alien. And we have to find the communities and the people and the cohorts that we can contain ourselves within. And that's another way to look at this as well. So we talked about the Mars in a square to Jupiter, which happened early this morning or late last night. And we talked about this at length yesterday, because this square here, while we are acting on this very aggressive glorification of the values that really hold us together, if we are not engaging the resources and the freedom that actually comes from being in tune with our own feelings and the natural world, right? Because that's the highest version of Aquarius, in my opinion. We can draw these events to a focus and without getting too exploitive about it, right? Which is Mars and Scorpio. We're kind of blaring this self-affirmation out there in a way that's rejecting a lesser experience, but it's really only satisfying ourselves with Mars in the picture, right? And so, yes, that's happening. The square to Jupiter in Aquarius, in late Aquarius, which is also so close to the natal moon of the United States, by the way, is our ability to find freedom and our real expansion in the ability to connect into the delicacy of our feeling, right? And the ability to see that as a resource, as an asset. And that's where the real freedom comes from. So again, it kind of goes around to what Barb was saying, that there's this wrinkle of time, and the only way to really resolve it is within ourselves, right? To be able to go into it's like being able to merge with the wrinkle itself and to find our place within it, rather than like trying to resist it or fight it. And Mars and Scorpio, for as much as it gives us the courage and the initiative and action to really act on that sense of communal value, the square to Jupiter is really going to put us back in our lane if we are invested in leaning into the discomfort of it, because it's going to seem like the real thing to do is just shout, blah, 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 this is what is important, and this is what is, this is what's really matters. And I'm going to make sure I tell everybody about it, right? And I'm going to march down the street, with my banner going, this is. And it's not that these things are one or the other. The square is that when they meet, it just spins you out. And so if you're ready for that, and this is what happened overnight. Like I said, this was something that happened last night into this morning. So a lot of dream state may have brought this out. And it's still fairly active. I mean, Mars and Jupiter don't move very quickly in their orbits, and so they stay connected to each other longer than maybe other things like the moon or Mercury or even the sun, right? Because we move in relation to them quicker than Mars and Jupiter move in relation to us. So still, though, it's being able to plug in. And this is where our freedom comes from, because Jupiter does really represent freedom and larger than life experiences. And it comes back down to finding ourselves within the power and the energy that moves through the collective. Aquarius is outside of time and space. And so being able to connect into the time wave, like consciously, is really important too. And I think this is where we will discover our freedom, right? As opposed to the marching down the street loudly proclaiming where we find our alliances. And that has its place too. But as we saw with the reading, right, the potential for destruction and recklessness is so high when we don't acknowledge that we also need to connect into what is, and the energy that is connecting all of us together, right? So, but we also do need to go into the depths, right? And that's what Scorpio really represents, is being able to go into the feeling of relationship and be able to hold our shit together while we're down there and come back up, and then use that energy as the meaning that creates worlds, right? So that was that square already happening. So then as the moon has moved through her transit of Aquarius, we're going to find find that she was in a square to Uranus early this morning as we go back. And this is not exactly a mutual reception, because the moon is exalted in Taurus, not at home, but it's very close. Every time this comes around, we have the same experience. And I say the same thing, that it's not exactly a mutual reception, but it's very close because the moon is exalted in Taurus. And of course, Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. So there is a way to actually manage this energy a little bit more gracefully than we may otherwise with a fixed square. And that is accepting within us, right, and adapting to the world around us through the idea that we're all on the stairway up. We're just all on different rungs of the ladder, or we're all on different steps for our own reasons and for our own journey and our own evolution. But we're all equal in the eyes of God, right? And so we feel that and we acknowledge that, and it becomes part of our inner experience that we're all going to the same place. The square to Uranus and Taurus is the very, very real glitches constantly in the physical reality, and the fact that we are being shown windows of reality that we can have, right? And really considering internally what it is that we want, right? And not making any firm decisions, but actually window shopping our reality and to maybe inspire us, right? And so there's that inspiration piece again. And Uranus, there's no stability with Uranus because it's forcing us to think outside of the box. It's forcing us to change our perspective because it literally shifts our perspective. And so we look at things from a whole new vantage point. We think we're futuristic, right? It's revolutionary, right? It's not, you can't pin Uranus down because Uranus is something that's not palpable physically. Therefore, it's outside of time and space, but it's very real. And so the disruption in this realm consistently within us, this square actually, for as much as fixed squares, like I said, can be really a challenge. What I think is really interesting here is that there is a ability to relate to each other, right? So that we can actually kind of relax into this square even more than we normally would, right? Like with this square with Mars and Jupiter, right? It's a little bit more tense there. Whereas this square, I feel like it allows us to accept the fact that there is no real stability in our physical reality and our resources and our bodies and our finances and our currency and everything else that Taurus represents. But there's something about that is allowing us to really identify within ourselves where we want to go next. We have all of these window panes of reality that we're kind of window shopping within ourselves. And even though there is that square where we feel like it's not that it doesn't matter, because we are all going to this, we're at the event horizon, right? We're all going to go over the edge together. God, you remember, what is the name of that game? There was, remember The Price is Right. There was that game where they had the little guy that would like ascend up the mountain and then would fall off the end. And I don't know, when I was a kid, that freaked me out so much. There were weird things when I was a kid that freaked me out, like that just did not sit well with me. But I'm getting this image now that we're all going up there and we're all on different rungs of the ladder or different points of the journey up the mountain. And we're all going to get to the top and fall off. We really are, because we're all going to go into this black hole and get spit out on the other side. So to some extent, it may feel like, well, what does it matter? Why even bother? Right? But there's something very stabilizing, or something, it's not even stabilizing because we're talking about Aquarius, but it is. It's like it's the gnosis. It's the 0 point that actually is stabilizing. And in that stabilization, it allows us to very easily handle the glitches and the oscillation in our material reality, because what it's doing is allowing us choice. It really is. We're all going there together, but how we get there is up to us. And that's a big part of our awakening process, much more, I think, than the location or the destination. That's just how I see it, right? And like we talked about before, every astrologer is going to has their own filter, and so they interpret all of these things through that filter. And so that's just the way that I see it. So, but it also seems to be, I don't know, it seems accurate to me. And the moon is, beyond that, is going to make a sextile to the sun and Mercury in Sagittarius too. So let's talk about that, because there are some opportunities to reconcile some things here and move into new territory. Just like with that Eight of Wands, right? Where it looked like that you had all of these directions that the thunderbolts or the lightning was going off into, and it's opportunity, right? You can go off in any direction, but it's happening very quickly. So first, though, with the sun in 17 degrees Sagittarius, this is a rebirth moment, right? Where we want to find our voice and express ourselves through this collective rebirth, right? And we can feel it, right? There's the quickening again. We know it's coming, and we want to find ourselves and to sustain ourselves through that experience. Now, we have to protect ourselves energetically through that process. And that's really what 17 degrees of Aquarius represents, is that when you are, especially with the moon, right? Because there are no boundaries here intuitively and astrally, we're all just kind of, seamlessly connected to this. So, but there is a really important element here that has to do with protecting ourselves in this realm. And if we're going to, consciously express ourselves through this collective rebirth and the meaning of it, we do need to find within ourselves this like watchdog, right? We need to be vigilant about our own energy. We are fully immersed in it. We have to still know that we are making ourselves susceptible to impact in some way, especially when we are consciously engaging ourselves, the sun, with this culturally stimulated rebirth process. So it is, and the thing is, we can do both, because we can find balance and harmony by investing these energies into each other. And that way we're not closing ourselves off entirely, but we're also not leaving ourselves open entirely to just being swept away by what the meaning of the culture that's already here. We have to be very aware of this. And then as the moon moves through her transit still, then she comes into the sextile with Mercury. Now, Mercury is moved into a degree in Sagittarius that is really stimulating our minds to accept where we're going, right? To be able to wrap our minds around the new country, the new territory. It's like people who emigrate to a new country, they start accepting the cultural traditions and customs in preparation for being part of that new place. And we are mentally going there, and it's happening very quickly. That's the other thing, right? Just like I talked about with the swiftness. But again, there is a level of discipline and training that we have to engage with astrally, emotionally, intuitively. The moon is about adapting to our environment, right? And adapting to anything that we interface with. And that's where our feelings really act as this ability to not only adapt, but to know what is going on. And so there, at 23 degrees Aquarius, we are coming back around to a point that Jupiter was sitting at for a very long time, where we have to really take seriously the training process that life is providing for us in every situation. And again, this is a sextile. So these two aspects are able to be invested into each other in order to create a whole new opening into possibilities. But it does. And we're going into a new place, and mentally we're kind of wrapping ourselves around what it's going to take. What are we going to need to do? What are we going to learn? What new customs, what new traditions, what is a language, right? Sagittarius is about language and abstraction, symbols. So we want to be able to interface mentally with that. But part of that too is the need to internally, and each of us personally, realize that every situation is an opportunity to train ourselves into mastery, discipline ourselves to be able to hold the water as the water bearer that Aquarius represents. And the moon is our internal water. And so we are being tasked with this very important job, I think, of being able to discipline ourselves and where we stand and how we feel in the face of moving into new territory. So these are really important times that we're embarking on. So let me kind of look over here if there's anything in particular. The last thing I want to talk about is, we don't see it on here, but asteroid Juno in Capricorn is in a square now to Chiron today. And I think, and as we're going to see, this is going to come back up in the next couple of weeks because of where Mercury, the Sun, eventually Mars, even Venus is going to not quite get back to that point, but she's going to be really close in her retrograde to squaring Chiron again. Very, very close. Maybe even by the time she gets to this point, Chiron will have moved direct and start moving forward. So it'll be really close. But this particular area of Capricorn is about being able to be in attunement to the geometric fractal of reality, right? And to, like a harp, right? Like a musical instrument, like being in resonance with the whole thing. And Juno is a closed system, in my opinion, right? Juno as as the asteroid that represents the goddess Juno, or Hera, right? The wife of Zeus. She represents the actual balancing of the scales itself, whereas Venus is the one that holds the scales, and she's able to feel through her sensitivity if it's balanced or not. Well, Juno seems to actually act in a way that balances them. And so it's a closed system. And so when we are in attunement to the universal rhythm, we're going to find that it balances the scales. Now, when Capricorn is in a square to Aries in general, you're finding the tension or the friction between our own self-actualization as individuals, as an ego consciousness, right, Aries, and the group. Right? Capricorn is about the group and being in tune with the group. And the square here is that when we find ourselves choosing to be in tune with the universal rhythm that has to do with not just ourselves, but with the whole thing, this can really easily, I think it's going to trigger a lot of Chiron wounding in general. And we're going to see this many times over, every time Mercury, the Sun, Mars, and even when Venus retrogrades back and squares Chiron in Aries. Our connection and our focus, attention, our sensitivity to the group integration in a square angle, right? Cross purposes with the wounded healer nature that continues to be activated when it comes to just who we are and feeling shame and guilt about it, right? And we get pulled off our center every time this gets activated. So this is going to be another instance of that. And so again, leaning in, and remember, these are cardinal energies. Aries and Capricorn are cardinal. There's momentum behind them. So what we're going to find here is that when they do meet and cross purposes, they're moving very quickly and they have momentum. And so they're going to spinning out and not knowing who we are, or am I supposed to focus on myself, or am I supposed to focus on the group? And how are those things actually going to be, brought together? Are they even able to be brought together? And it's really that space there is where we figure that out. But be aware that like tuning in to the whole and being in tune with the whole will undoubtedly bring out continue to bring up and out the wounded healer narrative about just actualizing our own individual self. And this is how we get trapped in a hive mind mentality. And you can see so much of how this has already transpired over the last 1.5 to 2 years is every time we try to think about our own actualization, we get pulled back into a narrative that's just like, you don't care about the collective and you don't care about other people. You're selfish, right? And so again, this is going to come back around again. And so just be aware, because Juno is, like I said, she's going to represent the acting on the balance itself. She's going to do the thing that creates the balance of the scales. And sometimes she acts in a way that is it's not a good look. Let's just put it that way, right? She does things that out of her jealousy and her revenge. Oh, that's interesting. That's very fascinating, since we have so much of that happening. And with, like I said, the Two of Wands today being reversed, and for Chiron to be in a direct square to Juno like that in Capricorn, I just feel like that there's such a high potential to get pulled into all of this drama. And really the challenge here, especially where Chiron is right now, has a lot to do with keeping our focus on the potential of what we can be, and not getting pulled into the old stories of what we think we have or who we think we are based on somebody else's intrusion into our own, into who we are. And that's a great way to control people, isn't it? Make them think they're selfish for even like caring about their own individual development. But boy, oh boy. I mean, and that's pretty obvious that that's been happening. It's just going to keep being brought back up even more so now that, we're getting into a time of the year where everything is really going to start consolidating into the areas of the charts that exclusively have to do with our relationship to other means and what it creates. So it's very powerful time right now. So I hope everybody is doing well and taking care of themselves as best they can. So with that, I'm going to leave it right there. That is plenty to work with for today. So thank you so much for being here. I truly, truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you are interested in a reading or subscribing to Subscribestar to support this work, you can just spend a moment here after, and there will be an outro screen that'll have all of that information for you. So I love you guys. Thank you for being here. Take really good care of yourselves. I'll see you tomorrow for the daily. God bless you, and I truly mean that. And have a great day. Bye, guys. Alrighty.